Welcome to part 4 of our videos. In part 1, we looked at vocabulary terms associated with the brain. In part 2, we looked at regions of the cerebrum, which you guys associate as being the brain. And in part 3, we reviewed functional areas and we looked at tracts. Now we're going to move down into something called the diencephalon. The diencephalon is in the center of the brain. So if I were to draw in right here, the rest of the brain, I have my frontal lobe, I have my central sulcus right here, I have my parietal lobe, I have my occipital lobe coming here, and the temporal lobe is covering over. So the diencephalon is really in the center of the brain. And if we actually look at this picture, we have a beautiful corpus callosum. Remember, that was the white matter mesentery tract that connected left and right. So, the diencephalon. It is deep to the thalamus, or deep to the cerebral hemispheres. And it is made up of the thalamus, which is most of this region right here. So the thalamus, which means inner room, this is the thalamus right here. So that's the thalamus. The hypothalamus is this region below. So hypo means below. So hypothalamus is below the thalamus. So the thalamus is made up of these two paired lobes, and they're actually connected. So it takes up most of the diencephalon, and it's separated by this gap right here. This gap is called the third ventricle. So this is actually one of the lateral ventricles. So you have these spaces of cavities in your brain, and one of them is actually between the left and right thalamic lobes. Now this gap is bridged by the between thalamic adhesion. They used to think it just glued the two pieces of the thalamus together. So right here is interthalamic adhesion, and right here. There's a lot of nuclei. Remember, nuclei is gray matter surrounded by white matter. And it relays all these projection tracts that come up the spinal cord to the right location. So you have projection tracts coming up. They go to the thalamus and it goes, oh, you go there. Oh, you go back there somewhere. Now, here's the thalamus. Interthalamic adhesion, everybody. Nice, beautiful corpus callosum. The epithalamus is towards the back, which is caudal, and it's made up of two things. This is the pineal gland down here, inferior, and it makes a hormone called melatonin that helps regulate sleep cycles. Then the habenular nucleus, that actually is a center that has axons coming out of it, so a white matter tract, that connects to something called the limbic system. So the most caudal part, pineal gland, and habenular nucleus. Now the hypothalamus is below the thalamus. So interthalamic adhesion right there. Thalamus, below the thalamus is the hypothalamus. And according to one of my graduate teachers, this was the most important part. So this picture has been flipped from this picture. So this is rostral, this is caudal. So interthalamic adhesion, corpus callosum, the hypothalamus is below it. And it connects to the pituitary gland by something called the infundibulum. This is actually a white matter tract. So it's myelinated axons going from one part of the brain to another part. And it controls homeostasis. That is your body keeping within its set points. It controls the autonomic nervous system. It controls the endocrine system. It can override your brainstem. So according to one of my graduate teachers, that was the most important part of the brain because of its role in regulating homeostasis. Now, I mentioned the limbic system before. There's a couple nuclei that attach to the limbic system. The first is this thing right here in the hypothalamus called the mammillary body, and the other one is the habenular nucleus. this limbic system. It's actually in the cortex, but it is linked to the diencephalon. So the limbic system. We have our mammillary body right here. We have our habenler nucleus back here. And they're connected to this system. And it used to be called the reptilian complex because some guy thought it looked like a reptile's brain. So it's all these structures that are surrounding the diencephalon. And it deals with strong emotional memory. Fear and flight. Your fear of spiders and snakes. Fancy, which is attraction. Fornication, which if you do not know what that means, I will let you look it up. Food or feeding. And fury, what makes you angry. So it deals with strong emotional memories. What made you really, really mad? What foods you really, really like. You go home for Thanksgiving dinner. You're like, oh, mommy's stuffing or turkey. Fancy, what you like. And fear, what you're afraid of. So strong emotional memories are taken care of in the limbic system. Now, as I mentioned, so this is looking head-on to the brain. So, as I mentioned, there's a couple nuclei attaching. We have the fornix in the back, and we have the mammillary bodies in the hypothalamus. They connect to a series of structures. Two of the more important ones are the amygdaloid body and the hippocampus. We're not going to worry on the models of the brains where those actually are. We're worrying more about what their functions are. The amygdaloid deals with emotional learning. So you've heard of operant conditioning. You get a reward or you get a punishment. That helps deal with it. Conditioning. Aggressive behavior. Olfaction. Smells you really, really like. So going home and smelling your mom's cooking when she was a very good cook. You have good memories there. And other emotional memories. Now the hippocampus, it looked like a seahorse. That plays a role in memory as well. So this plays a role with long-term memories. And they're actually connected by this white matter tract called the fornix. Or the fornix actually goes above the thalamus and connects parts of it. And it's just a white matter tract. It's on our brain models. So again, we have the amygdala that deals with emotional memories. We have the mammillary body, which connects to the limbic system. We have the fornix, which is a white matter tract that connects part of it. And the hippocampus plays a role in memory. So I'm going to ask you what these parts do. In lab, we're not going to worry. We're only going to worry about the fornix and the mammillary body.